The police came to ask about her husband, the man buried 5 years ago in a sealed coffin, the man whose ashes sat on her bookshelf, the man who vanished with $100 million and her heart. But if Daniel Crest was dead, why was he just spotted in Prague walking free, using a name he never told her? Vivian Hart, once the CEO of a billion-dollar tech empire, lost everything to the man she loved. Her fortune, her company, her dignity. Now, she has nothing left but a name, a digital trail, and a fury sharpened into purpose. He faked his death. He bought his freedom. He thought she'd stay broken. He was wrong. Hello family, welcome to True Life Stories. Please subscribe and leave a like for us, it means the world to us. Also share this video to your friends and loved ones and turn on post notifications so you don't miss future videos from us. Thank you as you do so. Sit back and relax as we dive into the story. The city buzzed beneath Vivian Hart's penthouse balcony, a steady pulse of lights, sirens, and ambition. Manhattan had never felt more like hers. She stood barefoot on the cool marble floor, sipping from a crystal flute of champagne as the skyline twinkled beyond the glass walls. Her phone chimed on the kitchen counter behind her. Another congratulatory message. Another headline. Heartline Systems CEO named Tech Innovator of the Year. Vivian didn't smile. She simply took another slow sip and watched the clouds roll in from the east. Success was never something she celebrated loudly. It was expected, earned, controlled. She had built Heartline from a cramped dorm room and a laptop so old it wheezed during boot up. Now, 12 years later, the company was valued at just over $2.1 billion, with government contracts, international partners, and a newly approved patent on biometric encryption that promised to change the landscape of digital security. Yet, with all that, the only thing that made her heart flutter wasn't on a stock chart or a boardroom screen. It was Daniel. He walked in from the guest bedroom, shirtless, rubbing a towel through his damp hair. "You're staring at the city again," he said with a teasing grin. "What's it saying this time?" Vivian turned toward him. "That it's mine," she said, stepping into his arms. "But so are you." Daniel kissed her forehead and held her close. He smelled like sandalwood and mint, the scent that had somehow become home to her over the past 18 months. He was different from the sterile suits she dealt with daily. He was warm, emotionally intelligent, romantic in a quietly poetic way. They'd reconnected at a high school reunion she hadn't even planned to attend. He was standing by the punch bowl in a navy blazer, same dimple in his left cheek, same mischievous glint in his eye. Like time had paused and waited for them to collide again. "I'm thinking," Daniel began slowly, leading her back to the couch, "about expanding the mobile firewall software into a dedicated platform. A full suite." Vivian raised an eyebrow. "You mean your project? You haven't even launched the beta yet." "It's more than a project now," he said quickly. "I've secured verbal interest from 2 firms in Singapore and 1 in Berlin. They want a scalable prototype within 6 months. But to do it right, I need serious funding." There it was, the pitch. Vivian narrowed her eyes. Daniel leaned in, his fingers lacing with hers. "Viv, this is more than a dream. I've mapped it out, built the back end. I just need capital to move it past the smoke and mirrors. This could change everything. For both of us." She studied him carefully. "How much?" He hesitated just a second. $100 million. Vivian blinked. "That's 70% of my available assets," she said flatly. "I know, but think of it as a joint venture. Heartline can absorb it in 2 years. Less if I land the licensing agreements. I'll draw up every clause you want. You'll retain 51% control. No surprises." Vivian stared into his eyes. He was serious, earnest, maybe a little too eager, but he'd always been passionate when he believed in something. "Let me see the prototype," she said. He pulled out his laptop right then and there. For the next hour, Daniel walked her through lines of code, UI sketches, potential partnerships, timelines, contingency plans. It was solid, not perfect, but promising. She had seen worse ideas get seed funding from venture capitalists who didn't know a firewall from a frying pan. Still, something inside her whispered, "Wait." But Daniel looked at her the way no one else did. Like she wasn't a title or a billionaire or a trophy. Like she was Vivian, the same girl who used to fall asleep in the computer lab with headphones in and dreams taped to the wall. And so, the next morning, after a night of back-and-forth legal reviews and whispered reassurances in bed, she signed the wire transfer. 2 days later, she received a call from the police. The voice on the line was flat and clinical. "Mrs. Hart, there's been an accident involving a black Mercedes S-Class registered to a Daniel Crest. Are you available to come to St. Luke's for identification?" Her mind went blank. An accident? Single vehicle. High speed. Car burst into flames upon impact. Witnesses called it in, but by the time responders arrived. "I'm very sorry." Vivian's hand trembled as she gripped the edge of the kitchen counter. The phone fell to the floor with a dull thud. Somewhere behind her, the champagne flute shattered on the tile. She didn't cry at first. Just stood there as silence pressed in around her like smoke. The next 48 hours passed in a daze. Confirming documents, medical reports, a detective explaining the severity of the burns and why there would be no open casket. A private burial was arranged. Vivian stood over a sealed coffin, dressed in black, surrounded by reporters and mourners, her face unreadable. He was gone. So was the money. But at the time, she hadn't put the two together. Not yet. The scent of lilies still clung to her hands. Vivian sat at the edge of her leather sofa, unmoving, her eyes fixed on the small black urn that rested on the coffee table. Smooth, polished, and cold. It felt like an object from a museum exhibit, not the last physical trace of the man she thought she would spend her life with. They told her there was nothing left of the body but ash. Nothing. No dental records, no bone fragments. Just remnants consistent with high-temperature combustion. The detective, a middle-aged man named Williams with coffee-stained teeth and a weary tone, said it was an unfortunate but conclusive case. She'd nodded numbly. Signed the release form. Now, she just stared at the urn. And the silence stared back. Her phone had been silent for hours. Not from lack of messages. Those had poured in from journalists, board members, friends, and enemies alike. She just hadn't answered any of them. They could wait. The world could wait. But she couldn't. She rose, still in the black dress from the burial, and crossed the room. Her laptop sat open on the kitchen counter. She brought up the old emails, the ones from Daniel about the office space he was supposedly renting for the startup. Somewhere in Brooklyn, near the waterfront. She clicked through the digital lease. It all looked legitimate. Notarized forms, building registry info, deposit receipts. Still, something felt off. Too smooth. She grabbed her keys. It was raining when she arrived. Brooklyn was gray and sleepy that afternoon, the wind slicing through her like a knife. Vivian pulled her coat tighter and walked up to the building. A steel structure, mid-rise, with weathered bricks and windows that hadn't been cleaned in years. No company signage. No buzz of startup energy. Just stillness. The security guard barely looked up from his crossword as she approached. "Excuse me," she said. "I'm looking for Level 8 Technologies. They were supposed to be operating on the 3rd floor." He glanced at her, then chuckled. "Ain't nobody in that floor for months. Maybe a year. Just storage up there. You sure you got the right building?" Vivian's stomach flipped. "I'm sure," she said firmly. "Can you let me up?" He shrugged and hit the release button. The elevator creaked its way to the 3rd floor. Vivian stepped out into a dim, echoing hallway. She walked to Suite 3A, the unit Daniel had listed in the lease. The door was slightly ajar. She pushed it open. Inside was nothing. No desks. No servers. No signage. Just a large empty room with dust-coated windows and discarded wrappers in the corner. A long-dead fluorescent bulb flickered overhead, buzzing faintly like a dying wasp. Vivian's throat tightened. Her hands trembled. She stepped farther in, heart pounding, scanning for anything, a receipt, a piece of mail, a business card. But there was nothing. Not even trash that could be linked to Daniel. She turned in slow circles, stunned. It was all a facade. Back in her apartment that night, She sat in the dark. The urn still sat untouched on the table. The building was empty. The company was fake. The lease documents were doctored. She called the number from the business plan Daniel had shown her. Disconnected. She called the 3 interested firms he had named. One didn't exist. The other 2 had never heard of Level 8 technologies. No partnership offers. No prototype demos. No Daniel Crest. The lies stacked higher with every call she made. Vivian pressed her palms to her temples. A sick, cold clarity began to settle in her bones. He had never planned to build anything. He hadn't just stolen her money. He'd crafted an entire fiction around her. Around her trust. Around their marriage. A cold sweat broke out along her spine. She didn't sleep that night. The next morning, she walked into the Midtown Police Precinct, carrying a folder stuffed with documents. Lease agreements, screenshots of emails, the investment contract, everything she could find. Detective Williams greeted her with the same indifferent half-smile. "You again," he said. "I need to reopen Daniel's case," Vivian said sharply. "I believe he's alive. I think he faked his death." Williams blinked. "What?" "There was no body. Just ashes. No verifiable DNA. No accident photos. And the office he supposedly rented doesn't exist. The entire business pitch was a lie. He stole $100 million from me." He raised a hand. "Mrs. Hart, don't patronize me," she snapped. "This was an elaborate con. He staged it perfectly. I need a forensic team to re-examine the crash. I need access to surveillance in the area. I need this treated like a fraud investigation, not a tragic accident." Williams sighed. "I'll look into it." But she knew that tone. It was the tone men used when they were already walking away in their minds. She returned 2 days later. The report was on his desk. "No foul play," he said, tapping the file. "Accident confirmed by 3 witnesses. No cameras in the area. Local fire chief signed off on the severity of the burns. Nothing to reopen." She stared at him. "You didn't even try," she whispered. Williams gave a pitying shrug. "Sometimes people die unexpectedly. I'm sorry for your loss." Vivian clenched her fists so tight her nails dug crescents into her palms. She left the precinct without a word. Later that week, she returned home to find a manila envelope slid under her door. No return address. Inside was a copy of the original police report, but certain lines were highlighted. The coroner's signature. The accident site coordinates. The names of 2 of the witnesses. All fake. Her hands trembled as she read. At the bottom of the file was a single sentence, typed in bold. "Check who paid Williams's mortgage last month." Vivian looked up slowly, blood roaring in her ears. Daniel hadn't just disappeared. He had bought his way out, and he was still out there. The boardroom was colder than usual. Not physically, the AC hummed with the same calculated efficiency, but the energy had changed. Vivian stood at the head of the long, obsidian glass table in Heartline Systems' executive conference room, her spine rigid, face composed, even as her insides twisted with dread. 11 pairs of eyes watched her from across the table. Some concerned, most calculating. Chairman Miles cleared his throat. "Vivian, we've all read the articles. There's no denying that the situation has evolved." Evolved? What a sterile, corporate way to say imploded. "I'm working with private investigators to recover the funds," she said firmly. "And my legal team is initiating asset tracing. It was a personal transaction. My mistake, not the company's." Miles glanced at the CFO, then back at her. "The company's reputation is tethered to yours. Clients are calling. Our share value has dropped 12% since the story broke. And the media isn't distinguishing between personal and professional failure." Vivian flinched. The headlines had come fast and merciless. Tech queen duped in $100 million love scam. Was it love or a con? Inside the fall of Vivian Hart. Billionaire widow or billion-dollar fool? "I'm still the majority shareholder," she said quietly. "But not irreplaceable," murmured someone at the far end of the table. The words cut deeper than she expected. Vivian's lawyer, seated beside her, leaned in. They want you to step down as CEO, Viv. Voluntarily. It's damage control. I started this company in a college dorm, she said, voice shaking now. I gave it 15 years of my life. This man stole from me, not Heartline. But perception is power, Miles said gently. And right now you're hemorrhaging both. Silence settled like dust. Vivian stood still for several seconds, then quietly unclasped her gold cufflinks, the ones Daniel had given her the day after their honeymoon. She placed them on the table beside the contract she refused to read. I'll make a statement by end of day. She walked out without another word. The penthouse felt like a mausoleum. Every corner echoed. Every surface screamed of Daniel. The bar cart he'd stocked with whiskey. The record player he swore made jazz sound like sex and velvet. The silk throw from Marrakesh they'd chosen together. Gone. All of it. Gone like her trust. Her dignity. Her empire. Boxes lined the hallway now, neat brown containers with brittle labels like kitchen and guest bath. Movers came and went with quiet, efficient steps. She didn't speak to them. Vivian wandered into the master bedroom and sat on the edge of the mattress. A heavy silence pressed against her chest. She looked down at her phone. Another message from the bank. Another notice of foreclosure. The penthouse had been collateral. She'd thought she was untouchable, that the woman who built an empire from a laptop could never fall this far. But she hadn't planned for heartbreak to come with a receipt. She let out a sound between a laugh and a sob. It felt surreal. Less than a year ago, she'd been on the cover of Forbes. Now, she was being liquidated. Her new apartment was a far cry from the skyline. 1 bedroom. 4th floor. A cracked window that wouldn't shut all the way. It smelled faintly of garlic from the downstairs deli. Vivian stared at the peeling paint on the ceiling and tried not to scream. She furnished it with the bare minimum. A mattress on the floor, a table for her laptop, and a chair that wobbled slightly when she shifted. There were no portraits on the walls. No photos. No trace of who she used to be. Her inbox was flooded. Not with support, but with cold inquiries from investors and former partners. Will the remaining funds be reimbursed? Are you still legally in control of the IP portfolio? Do you intend to repay us or declare bankruptcy? Not one asked if she was okay. The only one who did was her assistant, June, now her former assistant. Just say the word, and I'll come help. I don't care if the company's gone. Vivian hadn't responded. She couldn't. She didn't want pity. She wanted revenge. But more than that, she wanted answers. That night, the detective's name popped into her mind again, Williams. She opened her laptop. Public records. Mortgage databases. Property ownership. 3 hours later, she found it. A 3-bedroom brownstone in Queens, purchased outright last month, in his wife's name. Cash. Williams, a city cop on a public salary, had upgraded his life within 2 weeks of Daniel's funeral. Her pulse roared in her ears. She scrolled farther. The seller was a shell company. Its registered agent? A boutique law firm in Prague. Her fingers paused on the keyboard. Prague. That's where the anonymous envelope had said Daniel was spotted. She didn't sleep that night. She opened 3 monitors, tracing crypto wallets, bank transfers, corporate registrations. Years of experience in cybersecurity kicked in like muscle memory. Her vision blurred, but her mind sharpened. Every rabbit hole pulled her deeper. There were other victims. Other names. Other women who had been left with nothing but ashes and forged papers. It wasn't just about her anymore. Vivian leaned back in the chair. The window rattled behind her as thunder rolled across the city. Daniel had built a house of lies. She was going to burn it down. It was a quiet Tuesday afternoon when the knock came. Vivian wasn't expecting anyone. She rarely did these days. The apartment building was the kind of place where no one visited without calling first. The deli downstairs had stopped offering her free coffee. The neighbors, mostly immigrants and struggling artists, minded their own business. She liked it that way. Anonymity had become her armor. She peeled herself away from the laptop, where lines of code and data logs sprawled across her screen like a crime scene, and walked barefoot to the door. She paused. One hand on the knob. Another knock. Firmer this time. She cracked it open, chain still on. A man stood there in uniform. NYPD badge visible. Older, with sharp eyes and a tired jaw. His presence was calm but direct. "Ms. Hart?" he asked. She nodded warily. "That's me. I'm Detective Raymond Blake, Organized Crime Division." He held up his badge. "May I come in?" Her heart skipped. "What is this about?" "It's regarding your late husband, Daniel Crest." Every syllable felt like ice down her spine. Vivian undid the chain and stepped aside slowly. He entered without ceremony, eyes scanning the room. The wires, the multiple monitors, the empty coffee cups, the documents pinned across the far wall like a war room. He said nothing about it. He'd seen rooms like this before. People who'd been through hell always created shrines, not of grief, but of pursuit. "I assume you've been following some leads of your own," he said casually. Vivian folded her arms. "You came here for a reason. Say it." Blake reached into the file he carried and slid a photograph onto the table. A grainy image. A busy street. And at the center, Daniel. Alive. Walking across a cobblestone plaza with sunglasses on, a duffel bag slung over one shoulder, the collar of his coat pulled up. His face was thinner, sharper, but unmistakable. Prague. Time-stamped 3 weeks ago. Vivian's knees nearly buckled. Blake continued. Interpol flagged him in a parallel investigation. Goes by the name Leon Varga now. He's wanted for cybercrime, identity fraud, and money laundering in 3 countries. We believe he's part of a high-level criminal network. Quiet. Expensive. Professional. Vivian stared at the image, tears silently spilling down her cheeks. "He's alive," she whispered. "You have no idea what he did to me." "Oh," Blake said, "we do. But his record goes further back than your case." He pulled out another sheet. "We're building a joint case, but it's been hard. He's slippery. Always one step ahead. We've had 2 chances to grab him. Both times, he vanished before we arrived." Vivian's voice was low, bitter. "Because he's paying people off. He's always paid people off." Blake met her eyes. "Which is why I'm here. You know him better than anyone. His habits. His rhythms. His ego. We need help. And you want him just as much as we do." Vivian hesitated, then shook her head. "You're not going to find him. Not unless he wants to be found. He's too careful. Too smart." Blake gave her a knowing look. "That's why I'm giving you this." He slid over a small burner phone. "Encrypted contact. It's a back channel. You find something, anything, call it. If we get close, I'll call you." He paused, then added with an edge of warning, "Don't go after him alone." She didn't answer. He left without another word. The door clicked shut. Vivian stood motionless, staring at the photo on the table. Daniel Crest. No, Leon Varga. The man who held her as she cried the night her mother died. The man who kissed her neck before board meetings and called her his storm. The man who vanished with everything. She gripped the edge of the table. Her breath grew shallow. The betrayal wasn't a wound anymore. It was an infection. It had spread, deepened, hardened. She opened her laptop and dragged the photo into a facial recognition tool she'd coded herself. Something Heartline had shelved due to legal gray areas. It pinged 3 partial matches. Dubai, Buenos Aires, Vienna. She stared at the cities, her mind spinning. Every sighting was 6 months apart. He moved in a pattern, quiet, calculated, always vanishing before anyone got too close. But his ego was the key. He didn't just disappear. He made sure to leave a trace. A story. He liked the chase. The myth. The game. She pulled up her personal vault. Old emails from Daniel. Love letters. Business memos. Casual notes about travel and wine and art. She began parsing them for coded language, repeated words, names that didn't belong. There were breadcrumbs. Tiny, hidden things she'd overlooked. References to a man in Vienna or a red window in spring. Meaningless at the time. But not now. The wall in her apartment transformed overnight. Printouts, maps, data grids. Red thread. Pins. An obsession made visible. She wasn't just building a manhunt. She was building a profile. 3 days later, she sat at a cafe near Wall Street under a gray sky. Her laptop open, headphones in. A familiar face walked by. Darren Wexley, a venture capitalist who had once offered to buy out Heartline for $300 million. He didn't recognize her now. She watched him pass, then turned her attention to the encrypted crypto wallet she'd been tracing for 2 weeks. One that was suddenly active again. A transfer had occurred. Small. Unusual. The trail ended in a Luxembourg bank, but began with an account linked to a known alias of Daniel. She smiled. Sloppy. He was getting comfortable. That meant he wasn't scared anymore. She closed her laptop, finished her coffee, and walked into the wind, coat whipping around her ankles like armor. She wasn't scared either. She didn't care if she had to fly to Prague, Vienna, or the edge of the earth. She would find him. The air in Bucharest was thick with rain and cigarette smoke. Vivian stood at the window of her rented flat, a narrow fifth-floor walk-up in a building that moaned every time the wind shifted. Below, the street glistened with puddles as yellow trams rattled by, and a group of teenagers huddled around a cracked speaker, laughing over the sound of dripping eaves. She pressed a hand to the glass and watched a man in a gray trench coat cross the street. Wrong build. Wrong gait. Not him. But it never stopped her from checking. It had been 4 weeks since she landed in Romania. The last encrypted ping from Daniel's crypto wallet, or Leon's, or whoever he was now, had rerouted through a proxy chain that originated just outside Bucharest. That, and a paper trail from a law firm in Prague tied to a shell company registered here, led her across borders. She'd used an alias, Ava Mercer, a private cybersecurity consultant. The passport was fake. The conviction wasn't. By now, Vivian had given up trying to sleep normally. Her days were spent combing through digital trails, tailing people, bribing informants, and writing code from the corner of a moldy cafe. Her nights were spent scanning anonymous tip lines, digging through black market registries, and chasing phantoms. Until she met Marina. The club was called Vesper, exclusive, hidden, and frequented by the kind of men who didn't ask questions and carried cash instead of ID. Vivian wore black. Sleek. Simple. Not seductive, strategic. She took a corner seat by the bar and sipped a watery gin tonic. She was watching for Alexei Vadin, a known associate of Daniel's from his Vienna days. A money broker. The kind of man who operated in untraceable accounts and always wore gloves. Alexei didn't show, but someone else did. A woman, tall and sharp-shouldered, with a mane of auburn hair and eyes like glass. She moved with that detached awareness Vivian had learned to read. The woman caught her looking. Walk straight over. You're too stiff, she said in a low, accented voice. Like you're waiting to be watched. Vivian didn't respond. The woman signaled the bartender. One more of whatever she's pretending to enjoy. Vivian turned toward her. You know Alexei? The woman studied her carefully. I know many ghosts in this city. She reached into her clutch and slid a photo across the bar. Daniel. Younger. Shirtless. On a yacht. 3 years ago. He was calling himself Milo Kovacs then. Charming. Rich. He disappeared after our engagement. Vivian's fingers curled around the glass. You're not the first, the woman said. You won't be the last. Vivian nodded slowly. What's your name? Marina Zaitseva. He stole 12 million from my family. My father nearly killed himself trying to save face. Vivian leaned in. Then help me bury him. Over the next 2 weeks, Marina and Vivian formed a reluctant alliance. Half mutual respect, half mutual fury. Marina had access to people. Vivian had access to machines. They traced movement patterns, crypto pings, and encrypted transactions through deep web clusters. One particular data anomaly stood out. A safehouse transaction made by a shell account registered under the name Evan Tyrell, another alias confirmed through one of Daniel's fake IDs Marina had kept. It was connected to a private club known as Umbra, a place with no public address. Invitation only. No photos. No memberships. Just a door. Marina got them in. It was underground, literally. An abandoned wine cellar turned elite haunt for old money and criminals playing new games. There were no cameras. Phones were locked in steel boxes at the entrance. The walls were lined with red velvet and candlelight. A jazz trio played in the corner, but no one danced. Everyone watched. Everyone measured. Marina wore diamonds like armor. Vivian wore her silence. They were halfway through the club when Vivian saw him. Not Daniel, not quite. Just a glimpse. A man at a private booth, face turned, laughing with someone too closely. The back of the neck, the way he rested his hand against the wine glass. It screamed him. Her pulse spiked. She took a step forward. Marina caught her wrist like a whip. Wait, that's not him. Vivian blinked. The man turned, similar, yes. But not Daniel. The face was wrong. Younger. Lighter. Maybe a cousin. She felt her knees go weak with the adrenaline crash. That's when the waitress approached them with a card on a tray. From the gentleman near the back. They both looked down. The card read, Vivian, you're better at hunting than hiding. But don't forget who taught you the game. D. No signature. No address. Just the letter. And beneath it a red fingerprint. His. Her breath caught in her throat. Marina cursed softly in Russian. He had been here. He had seen her. They left immediately. Vivian didn't speak for the first hour. They walked along the Dambovita River, the night wind cutting through their coats like knives. He's toying with you, Marina said finally. He knows you're close. That's why he let you see the trail. Vivian stared ahead. Then I'll stop being close. I'll be exact. Marina gave her a long look. What happens when you find him? You think the police will stop a man with this kind of reach? He won't go quietly. I'm not asking him to. Vivian stopped walking. Her breath formed mist. She looked out across the water. I'm not just here to expose him. I want to watch his world collapse. Back in her apartment that night, she took the card and pressed the fingerprint against a small forensic scanner she'd smuggled in. Match. Daniel Crest / Leon Varga / Milo Kovacs / Evan Tyrell. Probability. 99.9987%. She saved it. Then, without flinching, she opened a blank screen and began coding a trap. An identity, a company, a baited opportunity that only someone like Daniel would be tempted by. It would be big. It would be noisy. It would be personal. And it would bring him to her. The file was called Ethernet Holdings. From the outside, it looked like a tech unicorn in stealth mode. A new AI security hybrid venture developing quantum-based cryptographic systems for financial institutions. The kind of thing that made greedy men salivate and cautious investors perk up. Vivian made sure of it. She built it from scratch over 2 sleepless weeks in a dim apartment in Bucharest. The walls still covered in strings and photos from the hunt. The branding was perfect. The website was glossy, minimal, and populated with fake testimonials from fabricated CEOs. The code base existed, just enough to pass early technical due diligence. The startup pitch was airtight, complete with a vague mission about decentralized integrity. Even the investors listed were credible, former clients of Heartline whose identities she spoofed just enough to make the bait look authentic, but unverifiable until too late. Vivian knew Daniel. She knew his triggers. He couldn't resist 3 things: exclusivity, control, and a woman he underestimated. The trap was her. It started with an invite. From the account of Ava Mercer, the alias she had been using, an encrypted email was sent to a known contact of Daniel's from Zurich. Someone she had seen on a transfer list connected to a previous shell company. The message was short. We're raising a private round, $200 million minimum entry. No press. No visibility. But first in gets first exit. If Leon's still breathing, he'll want a taste. AM. She didn't expect a reply immediately. But 2 days later it came. Send term sheet. He's interested. E.T. Evan Tyrell alias. Vivian stared at the screen, heart thudding like a war drum. He took the bait. The meeting was arranged for Zurich, in a suite at the Hotel Bauer au Lac, a place as old money as money gets. She paid in cash. No names on the door. Everything through encrypted channels. Vivian arrived early, dressed not for seduction, but for power. Tailored gray suit, hair tied back in a sharp braid, minimal makeup, no perfume. Just presence. Controlled. Contained. She checked the hidden mic strapped to her thigh. Connected to a small transmitter in her clutch, streaming directly to an Interpol field team stationed 2 floors below. Detective Blake had protested her involvement in person. "You're walking into a den of knives," he warned her. "I know. I brought a sharper one." Vivian stood at the window, overlooking the pristine lake, when the knock came. She didn't turn. "Come in." The door opened. Soft footsteps. A long pause. Then the voice, calm, cool, amused. "You never liked lake views. Said they were too still. Made you feel trapped." Vivian turned. Daniel Crest, Leon Varga, stood in front of her. Same eyes. Same smile. Different suit. Colder. Older. A little leaner. But still him. Vivian said nothing. He walked in with an easy stride and poured himself a glass of scotch from the minibar. "I have to admit, the branding almost fooled me. Quantum cryptography? Very 2026. Vivian stepped closer. "You came." "I had to." He took a sip. "No one sets a trap this intricate unless it's personal." "It is." Daniel tilted his head. "You should know I missed you." She smiled, sharp and quiet. "I know." He moved around her, circling slowly like a wolf. "So, what's the plan, Viv? You hand me a pitch deck, pretend we're partners. Then what? Poison my drink? Slip me a subpoena? You think this is a game?" He stopped in front of her. "Isn't it?" She met his gaze. "Not anymore." A silence stretched. Then he laughed, low, dry, almost impressed. "You've changed." "No," she said. "I just stopped loving the wrong person." She walked to the coffee table and picked up a leather folder. Inside, the contract. Blank. Untouched. She tossed it at his feet. "I didn't bring that for you. I brought it for the cops." His smile twitched. "You're wearing a wire?" he said, voice soft. "Of course. Interpol. 2 floors down." Daniel exhaled slowly. The amusement faded. "You don't get it, do you?" "I get all of it. I know about Vienna. Marina. The laundering in Brazil. The fake funerals. The dead detective in Warsaw. I know every name you've ever worn. I know about the man in Prague you paid to fake your ashes. And I know exactly how much you stole." He set down the glass. "Then you should also know I won't be taken alive." Vivian raised a brow. "Oh, you're not dying today, Daniel." He stepped toward her, fast. She didn't flinch. His hand went for her wrist, but her other hand was already moving. Stun gun. Small. Concealed. Direct to the side of his neck. He dropped instantly. Seconds later, the door slammed open. Interpol agents flooded in, guns drawn, shouting commands in multiple languages. Vivian stood over Daniel's collapsed form, breathing hard. Not shaking. Not anymore. It took 12 hours for the dust to settle. Interpol confirmed the identity through facial biometrics and fingerprint match. Daniel Crest, aka Leon Varga, aka Evan Tyrell, was in custody. He woke up handcuffed to a hospital bed with a bruised ego and a sealed indictment. Vivian declined the press conference. Blake handled that. She sat alone in the hotel room, staring out at the lake she still didn't like. A knock. It was Marina. She walked in quietly and handed Vivian a flash drive. Everything from his offshore servers. He kept trophies. "You might want to know what he said about you." Vivian didn't take it. "I don't need to hear his voice again." Marina sat across from her. "You do know this won't erase the damage, right?" Vivian looked up. "I know." "Then why does it matter?" Vivian's answer was quiet, but certain. "Because this time, the lie ends with me." The courtroom was quiet. Not silent. Courtrooms were never truly silent, but subdued. Tension pulsed just beneath the polished floor and white fluorescent lights. Vivian sat in the front row of the gallery, expression composed, hands folded in her lap. The gray dress she wore was simple, almost monastic. No jewelry. No makeup. Just her. On the stand sat Daniel. Not Daniel, really. Leon Varga, according to the court records. Dressed in a suit provided by the state, his face was paler now, lips chapped, hands cuffed and trembling slightly. The weight of confinement did not suit him. His charisma, once his greatest weapon, sat dormant, gutted by legal cross-examinations and a fortress of evidence that Vivian herself had helped construct. Wire fraud, identity theft, securities fraud, international racketeering, falsifying death, obstruction, money laundering, bribery, attempted assault. The list unfurled like a grim resume. Vivian didn't blink. She didn't look away. Her name was mentioned again and again, but always clinically. The Heartline incident. The heart transfer. Asset betrayal. Words meant to sterilize personal tragedy into court-safe terminology. But she remembered what they all really meant. Love manipulated. Trust weaponized. And a future stolen. At one point, Daniel looked at her. Just once. Across the sea of murmuring attorneys and armed guards. His eyes tried for softness. For apology. But Vivian only tilted her chin and gave the smallest, coldest smile. It was over. The sentence was handed down mid-afternoon. 72 years. No parole. No deals. The courtroom buzzed as the judge finalized the ruling. Vivian stood. Not triumphant. Not vindicated. Just still. She stepped outside into the late autumn chill. Reporters rushed forward, voices layering over one another like a chaotic choir. Ms. Hart, do you feel justice was served? Do you plan to write a book? Do you forgive him? Will you return to Heartline? Are you starting a new company? She raised a hand. The crowd hushed. I'm not here to relive what happened, or to rewrite it. I'm here because I finished it. Then she walked through the press, through the swarm of microphones and questions and flashing cameras, like a ghost leaving her own funeral. Weeks later, she stood in a much smaller room. No marble, no microphones, no legal jargon. A shared office suite on the edge of Midtown. Hardwood floors, potted plants, a coffee machine that sputtered on the second pour. The brass plaque on the door read, Ashline Foundation, protecting women against financial exploitation and digital abuse. The room buzzed with energy. Women seated around laptops. A meeting in progress. Someone sketching out a blockchain trace tool on a whiteboard. Vivian watched it all from the corner. She didn't want to lead this time. Not in the spotlight. She was the engine now, not the face. The women here, coders, lawyers, journalists, survivors, they would tell their stories. She would build the system beneath them. A young intern passed her a coffee. Ms. Hart, the new encryption demo is ready. She smiled faintly. It's just Vivian. She walked into the glass conference room, where 6 other women waited to begin. As she sat, she caught her reflection in the glass wall. Older, sharper, unbroken. That night, in her apartment, still modest, still above the deli, Vivian opened the closet and pulled down a single box she hadn't touched in over a year. Inside, the cufflinks Daniel had given her. His last letter and signed. And the urn, still sealed. Still fake. Still heavy with the lie. She carried it to the fire escape and looked out over the city. No ceremony. No anger. She simply opened the lid and let the gray dust pour into the night, scattering over streetlights and car horns and buildings that didn't know her name anymore. Ashes. Not his. Not hers. But the memory of a life that no longer existed. When it was done, she whispered something to the wind, then turned and walked back inside. We have come to the end of the story. I hope you enjoyed it. Leave a like and subscribe to my YouTube channel for more interesting stories.